couple things. We want to maximize the time between when the pump is on and when we take the measurement. And then on the form, we want to note, approximately how long since the pump was last on. And so the easiest, probably the best way to do this for a domestic well would be, I would assume, first thing in the morning. So presumably your well isn't pumping, all night long or something, right? So it should be from the time kind of when you go to bed or after dinner to first thing in the morning, before you take a shower or whatever, is going to be probably the longest time for a domestic well to have been, sitting and unpumped. So then as far as electric tape goes, decontaminate it. Then, usually there's some different ones, but you turn it on and there's usually a sensitivity potentiometer. And so it kind of depends on the water you're dealing with. Usually somewhere in the middle will work. If it's really clean water, like low conductivity water, low dissolved solids, then you need to turn that's gonna have a lot of resistance in making this electrical connection, so you turn the sensitivity way up. Around here, I imagine it's relatively salty water, so probably in the middle or something is fine, and then you just press the test button to make sure it's working, and then you go ahead and just start lowering it down the well slowly, and it helps if you know your last measurement, so you know about where you're going. And then when you start approaching that, you slow down, and you'll probably get it up, and then you pull it back up, and usually you end up kind of with holding it like this, adjusting it up and down a little bit, right to find where it beeps, and then kind of mark it with your thumb usually, and then you pull it up and read it, and that's the measurement. The steel tape, first thing, like we said, is clean and decontaminate the tape. And then one catch with the steel tape is it's a little tricky when you're doing your first measurement, right? Because you ideally want to lower that tape, maybe a foot or two into the existing water level. And so usually when you've been doing it on a well for a while, about where that water level probably is. So you can estimate pretty well how far down to lower that tape. First time through, if you're doing it just with a steel tape, you might have to experiment. You have to take a few guesses, put maybe chalk up a long stretch of the tape, and you're gonna have to say lower it down to a certain depth, pull it up, see if you hit water, lower it down a little more until you hit water. So and then from then on it's going to be easier, but that's the trick. So here I just said review recent measurements to determine the approximate hold point. So that's what they call in this technique, that's the point on the tape you lower it down to, and is called the hold point. So if I gave in this example here, if say you had a previous measurement that said 55 feet below the measuring point, and you knew that that water level tends to vary by about 1.5 feet either way from 55 below the measuring point, a reasonable hold point might be 57 feet. That would give you room for it to be 1.5 feet higher or lower, and you'd say chalk the lower 4 feet of the tape, and then just lower that tape in there, and when you get close, you put your thumb, kind of pinch it at your hold point, and then you would just lower it down until you hit the top of your measuring point with that hold point, and then you quickly are gonna wind it back in until you get to the end, and then you're gonna look at where on that chalk mark did the water come up to, and you're gonna read that point. And so the standard when you're doing this, it's always in feet, tenths, and hundredths of a foot. I mean, you could do it in inches and eighths and sixteenths if that was the only tape you had, but the industry standard is feet, tenths, and hundredths, kind of engineering units. So anyway, then you read they call the point, that chalk mark, the water on the chalk mark, in this method they call that point the cut. So you've got the hold, the two distance measurements, the hold mark and the cut, and then you subtract the cut from the hold, and that gives you how far down between your measuring point and water. And there's a spot on this form to mark your hold point and your cut, and then you subtract it, and you get the depth to water. And then you do it again as basically a quality control check. And best practice is to pick a slightly different hold point when you do that, just, you know, in case you're doing something with your math or whatever that related to that hold point. Do a slightly different hold point, and they should still, you know, come out within like 2/100ths of a foot of each other. So that's the steel tape method.